How did your parents invade your privacy? My father started recording our family dinners for his Authentic Parenting podcast without telling us, then installed hidden microphones throughout our house to broadcast our private conversations to paying subscribers. Dad started the podcast claiming he wanted to help other parents by sharing real family dynamics. At first, he'd just take notes during dinner and talk about general parenting challenges without naming us. He said it was therapeutic for him and helpful for his small audience of other divorced dads. Mom had left years ago, and he acted like the podcast filled that void. Then he bought a professional microphone and started placing it on the dinner table. Just pretend it's not there, he said. I want to capture authentic family moments. My younger brother and I felt weird, but Dad seemed happier than he'd been in months. He said the podcast gave him purpose. We could hear him late at night editing audio and adding commentary about our conversations. Dinner was just the beginning. He'd leave his phone recording when he drove us to school, capturing our morning complaints and sibling arguments. He installed a smart speaker in the living room, for convenience, but I noticed it was always listening. When I confronted him, he said he only used snippets and changed our names, but I recognized our exact conversations in his episodes, just with fake names instead of our real ones. I started finding tiny microphones everywhere, inside lampshades, behind picture frames, even in the bathroom vent. When I showed him one, he got defensive. Other parents need to hear real families, he said, not the fake perfect ones on social media. He claimed we were helping thousands of struggling parents by being honest, but this level of surveillance felt violating and wrong. My brother found Dad's laptop open and discovered the truth. The podcast had a paid subscriber tier where people could access unedited family recordings for $40 a month. Hours of our private conversations, our fights, our breakdowns, even phone calls with friends. The subscriber list had over 200 names. Dad was making $8,000 a month selling our privacy. Some subscribers left comments requesting more content from the daughter that made my skin crawl. I tried telling my school counselor, but Dad had anticipated that. He showed her release forms he'd forged with my signature, plus edited clips making it sound like I supported the project. Then I got my college acceptance letter. I was telling my best friend on the phone, crying with joy about finally escaping. 20 minutes later, Dad posted a special episode featuring our call. Subscribers were commenting on my college choice, my financial aid details, even my emotional vulnerability. One user said he couldn't wait to hear how I handled being away from home. Another asked if Dad would install microphones in my dorm room. I confronted Dad that night and demanded he delete everything. He laughed and showed me the contract he'd signed with a podcast network. They owned all our recordings now and planned to release them as a serialized audio drama. You'll get over it, he said. Besides, your college is expensive, and this is how we're paying for it. He'd already spent my college fund and was using the podcast income for tuition. If I wanted to go to school, I had to keep performing for strangers. That's when I noticed something worse on his laptop. A folder labeled Visual Content Trials. Inside were test videos from hidden cameras I hadn't found yet. My bedroom, the bathroom, even changing areas. Time-stamped from the last month. He wasn't just recording audio anymore. The file names had prices next to them. He was testing the market for video content, seeing what people would pay to watch us. I grabbed the laptop and ran to my room, locking the door behind me. Dad pounded on it, demanding I return his property. As I scrolled through the files, I found contracts with usernames I recognized from the comments. Private deals for specific content. One subscriber had paid $300 for morning routine footage. Another wanted authentic teenage emotional breakdowns. The requests got more specific and disturbing the deeper I looked. At the bottom of the folder was a contract template dated for tomorrow. The buyer's username was one I'd seen commenting on every episode about me. The contract was for exclusive in-person meet and greet at our house while Dad was conveniently traveling for a podcast conference. The amount was $5,000. Dad had already signed it. My hands shook as I heard him picking the lock on my door. I looked at the contract again. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow at 3 p.m. The buyer's requirements included private one-on-one time and authentic interaction as heard on podcast. Dad had noted at the bottom, she doesn't know yet. Will ensure compliance. The lock clicked open and Dad stepped into my room. I need that laptop back, he said calmly. I gripped the laptop harder against my chest and took a step backward toward my desk. I need it for my homework that's due tomorrow morning, I said. My voice came out steady even though my hands were shaking. Dad moved further into my room and his body blocked the doorway completely. The calm look on his face started slipping as his jaw tightened. I watched him close the door behind him with his foot. The click of the latch made my stomach drop. I kept backing up until my legs hit my desk chair. Why does this subscriber need to meet me? I asked. Dad's eyes shifted away from mine and looked at the wall behind me. Just a fan who wants to thank the family for helping him, he said. His hands moved to his pockets, but I could see them clenching into fists through the fabric. While keeping eye contact with him, my fingers worked behind the laptop screen. I found the folder with the worst videos and started dragging it to my browser. The school cloud storage page was already open from earlier. I clicked upload and watched the progress bar appear at the bottom of my screen. 1%, 2%. The files were huge and the upload crawled along. Dad took another step closer and I could smell the coffee on his breath. My free hand found my phone in my pocket. I pulled it out and started typing a message to my brother without looking at the screen. The muscle memory from years of texting under my desk at the school kicked in. Stay in your room, locked door, Dad knows I found everything. My thumb hit send and I slipped the phone back in my pocket. It buzzed almost immediately with his response. I didn't need to look to know he understood. Dad changed his approach and sat down on the edge of my bed. The mattress creaked under his weight. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and put on his understanding father face, the one he used when he wanted something. We're a team, he said. This podcast is our family business and you're old enough to be a real partner now. His voice got softer and more reasonable sounding. I'll give you 30% of everything if you just cooperate tomorrow. The upload bar showed 15%. My fingers moved across the keyboard while he talked. I created a new folder on the desktop and named it Family Vacation Photos 2023. I dragged some random pictures from my documents folder into it. Beach photos from 2 summers ago, birthday parties, normal stuff that wouldn't raise any alarms. Then I found the real evidence folder in the downloads and moved it deep into the system files. I buried it 3 folders deep in the Windows directory where he'd never think to look. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the laptop, but I kept my face neutral. Dad stood up from the bed and reached for the laptop. I need it back now, he said. I pulled it against my chest and stepped sideways along the desk. You don't respect my privacy, so why should I respect yours? I said. His face got red and he pointed at me. Those release forms I showed your counselor say you agreed to everything, he said. No one will believe you didn't consent to this. The upload hit 40%. While he ranted about the forms, I glanced at the network contract still open in another tab. The delivery deadline was tomorrow at 5 p.m. The buyer's username, AuthenticDadFan47, appeared 6 times in the email chain. Each mention talked about premium access and exclusive content. My stomach turned as I read his specific requests for tomorrow's meeting. Dad moved closer and I knew I was running out of time. I need to use the bathroom, I said. I closed the laptop and set it on my desk. Dad's eyes followed it, but I grabbed my phone and headed for the door. 2 minutes, he said. I nodded and walked down the hall to the bathroom. Once inside, I locked the door and pulled out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen as I took screenshots of everything I could remember. The contract details, the buyer's username, the $5,000 payment. I attached them to an email and typed emergency help in the subject line. The school counselor's email was already in my contacts. I hit send and watched the loading circle spin. My stomach churned as it finally showed sent. I looked up at the bathroom vent and noticed something that made my skin crawl. A tiny black circle that didn't belong there. I stood on the toilet seat and looked closer. It was a camera lens, no bigger than a pen tip. I raised my phone and took 3 photos from different angles. The camera was positioned to see the whole bathroom. The shower, the toilet, everything. This was evidence he couldn't delete remotely. I had proof now that no one could deny. I flushed the toilet for cover and walked back to my room where Dad was sitting at my desk, clicking through files on the laptop. The fake folder was open and he was looking at old beach photos from 2 years ago. These are nice, he said without looking up. I grabbed the laptop case from my bed and pretended to organize my school stuff while sliding my hand into the side pocket. The USB drive was right where I always kept it for backup files. My fingers closed around it and I pulled it into my palm. Here, I really need to finish my essay, I said, reaching for the laptop. He closed it and handed it over but kept watching me. You need to be ready for tomorrow's meeting at 3, he said, standing up. Wear something nice, maybe that blue dress from your birthday. My stomach twisted, knowing exactly what he meant. He walked to the door and turned back. And smile, our guest is paying good money to meet you. He left, and I heard his bedroom door close, followed by the familiar sounds of him settling in to edit audio. I waited 10 minutes, then knocked softly on my brother's door. He opened it a crack and I slipped inside. His room was dark except for the glow from his phone screen. I showed him the USB drive and whispered about the cameras I'd found and the meeting Dad had scheduled. His eyes got wide when I explained about the buyer coming tomorrow. We sat on his bed whispering plans while Dad's voice drifted through the wall as he recorded commentary for his next episode. We leave at 4 in the morning, I told him. Pack your school bag with extra clothes tonight. He nodded and squeezed my hand. We agreed I'd go straight to the counselor when school opened and he'd wait in the library where it was safe. Neither of us slept much that night. I lay in bed listening to Dad work until almost 3:30 in the morning. Finally, his chair creaked and I heard him walking to his bedroom. I waited another 30 minutes to be sure, then tapped on my brother's door. He was already dressed with his backpack ready. We moved through the house like ghosts, avoiding the creaky floorboard by the stairs and the loose tile in the kitchen. At the front door, we stopped and looked at each other. If he asks, we had that science project, my brother whispered. I nodded and turned the deadbolt slowly. The morning air was cold and dark. My brother grabbed my hand as we stepped outside and walked quickly down the driveway. We didn't talk during the 20-minute walk to the school. The building was locked, but we sat on the front steps waiting. Other early students started arriving around 6:30. The janitor unlocked the doors at 7, and I went straight to Clarissa Waite's office. She wasn't there yet, so I sat on the floor outside her door clutching the USB drive and my phone with the bathroom camera photos. She arrived at 7:15 carrying coffee and papers. One look at my face and she dropped everything to unlock her door. Get in here right now, she said, pulling me inside. I handed her the USB and she plugged it into her computer. Her face got more serious with each file she opened. The videos, the contracts, the subscriber list with their sick requests. This is criminal, she said, reaching for her phone. We need to get you somewhere safe immediately. She called Child Protective Services first, explaining the situation while I sat in the chair across from her desk. Then she called the school resource officer, who arrived within minutes. They both looked at the evidence on her computer screen. The officer's jaw tightened when he saw the bathroom camera photos. "Your brother is in the library?" Clarissa asked. I nodded. "Good. He stays there until we figure this out." She was making another call when the secretary knocked on the door. "There's a parent here saying he needs to take his daughter home for a family emergency," she said. Clarissa and the officer exchanged looks. "Tell him I'll be right there," Clarissa said calmly. The officer stood up and adjusted his radio. "I'll go talk to him," he said. "You stay here with her." Through the office window, I could see Dad in the main office wearing his nice jacket and biggest smile. He was chatting with the receptionist like nothing was wrong. The officer walked out slowly, keeping things casual and professional. I watched Dad's face change when he saw the uniform. The officer was talking to him near the counter where other parents were signing their kids out sick. Dad couldn't make a scene without everyone noticing. His hands moved as he talked, probably explaining about the family emergency. The officer just nodded and kept things friendly while subtly blocking the path to the counseling offices. Clarissa was on her computer typing up an official report with timestamps and descriptions of everything on the USB. "This creates a paper trail," she explained. "Everything needs to be documented properly for court." She typed each file name with the date and time it was created while I watched the officer through the window still talking to Dad by the front desk. The officer kept his body positioned between Dad and the hallway leading to our offices. Dad's face was getting red and his hands moved faster as he talked. Other parents were starting to notice the scene. The secretary came back to tell us Dad was insisting on seeing me right away for a medical emergency. Clarissa told her to say I was in mandatory state testing and couldn't be disturbed for 2 more hours. She kept typing the evidence list while I took photos of her computer screen with my phone as backup. The officer came back 20 minutes later and said Dad was waiting in his car in the visitor parking lot. He'd tried every excuse to get past the desk, but the staff held firm. My phone started ringing and the screen showed a number I didn't recognize. Clarissa nodded for me to answer it on speaker. A man's voice introduced himself as Bernard Krause from the podcast network. He said he'd heard I was making false allegations about their content creator and wanted to understand my concerns. His tone was friendly, but there was something cold underneath. He said the network took these matters seriously and wanted to resolve any misunderstandings quickly. Clarissa was writing notes as he talked about how the show helped thousands of families. He asked if I'd be willing to sign a simple clarification statement saying this was all a miscommunication. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line was from a law firm representing the podcast network. I opened it while Bernard was still talking. The email said I was engaging in defamation and slander that was damaging their brand. They demanded I stop spreading false information immediately or face legal action. The letter had lots of legal terms, but the threat was clear. Clarissa took a screenshot of the email and added it to her growing file. She wrote me a note that said, "Don't respond," while Bernard kept asking if I was still there. I told him I needed to think about it and hung up. The financial aid counselor knocked and came in carrying a folder. She'd pulled up my college account records after getting Clarissa's message. The account that should have had $18,000 for my first year was empty. The withdrawals started 3 months ago, right when Dad's podcast got picked up by the network. Each withdrawal matched deposits into Dad's business account for the show. She had printouts showing the money trail clearly. Dad had forged my signature on the withdrawal forms. The officer said this was fraud on top of everything else. He asked if I needed anything from home while Dad was stuck here at the school. I realized I'd need clothes and my laptop charger if I wasn't going home tonight. The officer said he'd drive me there now while Dad was still in the parking lot. We took his patrol car, and I sat in the back feeling weird about being in a police car. The house looked normal from outside, but knowing about all the cameras inside made my skin crawl. The officer came in with me, and I grabbed a backpack to fill with clothes. In my room, I pointed at the smoke detector on the ceiling. The officer stood on my desk chair and pulled it down. A small camera was wired inside, the lens pointing directly at my bed. He took photos of it and put it in an evidence bag. I grabbed clothes and toiletries while he checked other rooms. We found 3 more cameras in places I hadn't even thought to look. The heating vent in the bathroom had one tucked behind the grate. Another was inside a decorative plant in the hallway. Even the kitchen had one hidden in the microwave's vent hood. The officer said these were professional-grade devices, not cheap ones from online. Back at the school, my brother was waiting in the library like we'd planned. He slipped me a folded piece of paper when I hugged him. I opened it in the bathroom and saw 3 usernames from Dad's subscriber list. My stomach dropped when I recognized the names. Our neighbor, Mr. Peterson, who always offered to help with yard work. Jason's dad, who drove carpool sometimes. Even the assistant coach from my brother's soccer team. These men had been paying to listen to our private conversations for months. They'd seen us around town, at the school events, at the grocery store, all while knowing our secrets. The violation felt so much worse knowing it was people we actually knew. Back in Clarissa's office, we looked at the buyer's contract again. The appointment was definitely for 3 p.m. tomorrow at our house. His requests were specific about wanting authentic interaction like he'd heard in the episodes. He'd paid $5,000 for this meeting with me alone. The officer's face got tight as he read Dad's notes about ensuring my compliance. He made a call to the detective unit and explained the situation. I could hear him using words like minor and exploitation and imminent danger. 2 detectives arrived within an hour. They looked at all our evidence and discussed options. One wanted to do a sting operation to catch the buyer in the act. The other thought we should do a welfare check on the house immediately. They went back and forth about the best approach to get maximum charges. Finally, they decided on surveillance first to gather more evidence. They'd watch the house and document who came and went. I gave them the buyer's payment confirmation from Dad's files. It had his email address and the PayPal transaction details. The detective said they could trace his real identity through the payment system. They'd also check if he had any prior incidents or was on any watch lists. The younger detective was already typing on his laptop, running the email through various databases. A notification popped up on Dad's laptop screen while the detective was still searching, and I saw the buyer's username flash across the screen. The detective clicked on it and we all leaned in to read the message asking for our exact street address and confirming I'd be alone for the meeting. My stomach turned as another message appeared with Dad typing back that yes, everything was set up just like they discussed. The house would be empty except for me, and he'd make sure I was there. The detective took screenshots of everything while I felt like I might throw up right there in the office. He closed the laptop and said we needed to move somewhere safer immediately since Dad knew where we were at the school. The older detective made a quick phone call, and within 10 minutes, 2 officers arrived to escort us to the police station downtown. My brother grabbed his backpack and stayed close to me as we walked through the empty hallways to the back exit where a patrol car was waiting. The ride to the station felt surreal, watching normal people going about their day while our whole world was falling apart. At the station, they took us to a conference room with worn chairs and a water cooler in the corner. My brother curled up on one of the chairs trying to sleep, but his eyes kept popping open every few minutes. I couldn't even think about resting with everything spinning in my head. My phone buzzed with an email from Bernard Krause at the podcast network, and my hands shook as I opened it. He was offering to pay for my entire college tuition if I signed an NDA and recorded one episode saying this was all a big misunderstanding, that I actually supported Dad's podcast, and the whole thing was just teenage rebellion. The email had legal documents attached with places for me to sign and initial on every page. I showed it to the detective who had stayed with us, and he said not to respond yet, that this could be evidence of them trying to cover up what they knew. Clarissa arrived at the station with sandwiches and bottles of water for us. She sat down across from me and explained that I'd need to give an official statement soon, and we should practice keeping to just the facts. She had me go through everything that happened, stopping me when I started getting emotional or adding opinions instead of just saying what occurred. We practiced for almost an hour until I could tell the story without my voice breaking or getting sidetracked by how angry I was. My phone lit up with a notification from Dad's podcast app, and I saw he'd posted a new teaser episode. The title said big developments were coming tomorrow that would change everything for loyal subscribers who'd been following our family's journey. Within minutes, the comments section filled with people guessing what the announcement might be, some hoping for video content, others wanting more access to our daily lives. The detective asked if I remembered any of Dad's passwords, and I gave him the ones I'd figured out from watching him type. He logged into Dad's email on his computer and started going through folders while I watched over his shoulder. There were dozens of contracts with different buyers, each one more specific and creepy than the last. Some wanted recordings from specific times of day, others requested certain emotional situations, and a few even asked for staged scenarios that Dad had apparently agreed to arrange. The detective printed everything and put it in a growing evidence file. I pulled out my phone and showed him all the photos I'd taken of the hidden cameras around our house. He spread them out on the table and started marking their locations on a diagram he drew of our floor plan. We counted 12 devices just in the areas I'd checked, and he said there were probably more in places I hadn't thought to look. The bathroom had 3 different angles covered. My bedroom had 4, and even the kitchen had multiple cameras hidden in everyday objects. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad saying he was heading to his conference now, but reminding me to be home by 2:30 to prepare for our guest. He added that I should wear something nice and be welcoming since this was an important supporter of our family's work. The detective took a photo of the message and added it to the file. 20 minutes later, another message came through on Dad's laptop from the buyer asking if he could come at 2:15 instead of 3 because of traffic on the highway. The detective responded from Dad's account saying that would be fine, and I watched him coordinate with other officers over his radio to adjust their surveillance positions. They had unmarked cars ready to watch our house, and officers prepared to move in once the buyer arrived. The detective set up a camera on a tripod and asked me to make a video statement explaining that I never agreed to any recordings or meetings with strangers. My hands were shaking, so bad I had to clasp them in my lap to keep them still. I looked at the camera and started talking, explaining how Dad never asked permission, how I found out about the recordings, and how scared I was about this meeting he'd arranged. My voice cracked a couple times, but I got through the whole thing without crying. The detective said it was perfect, and saved the file with all the other evidence. My phone started buzzing in my pocket while the detective was organizing the evidence folders, and I saw Dad's name on the screen but didn't pick up. The detective noticed and told me to let it go to voicemail while he set up recording equipment on his desk. Dad's voice came through the speaker, sounding fake calm, as he said he'd been thinking about my college situation and wanted to make a deal. He promised to transfer full control of my tuition money to my account right now if I just went through with today's meeting and acted normal for the guest. He kept talking about how this was a simple business transaction, and I was being dramatic about something that would only take an hour of my time. The detective's face got harder as Dad mentioned the content trials and how our supporters were willing to pay good money for special access. He basically admitted everything without realizing the police were recording every word he said. The detective immediately called someone about getting an emergency warrant while I saved the voicemail to 3 different cloud accounts just to be safe. Within an hour, a judge had signed papers allowing them to search our house and seize all recording equipment based on the evidence we'd shown them. The detective said things were moving faster than usual because of the immediate danger and the buyer showing up today. They set up a laptop on the conference room table where I could watch our house through police cameras they'd positioned on the street. My brother sat next to me eating vending machine snacks while we waited for something to happen. At exactly 2:20 p.m., a silver rental car pulled up to our house, and a man got out looking around nervously. He was older than I expected, maybe in his 40s, wearing nice clothes like he was going to a business meeting. The detective pointed out 3 unmarked police cars already positioned around our neighborhood as the buyer walked up our front path. He knocked on the door and waited, checking his phone and looking at the windows. When nobody answered, he knocked again louder, then tried the door handle, which Dad had apparently left unlocked for him. The second his hand touched that handle, the detectives moved in from all sides with their badges out. The buyer dropped his phone and put his hands up immediately while they explained he was detained for questioning. They picked up his phone and one detective started going through it right there on our front lawn. The buyer kept asking for a lawyer and saying he didn't do anything wrong, that he was just visiting a friend. The detective with his phone held it up to show hundreds of saved recordings from Dad's podcast, plus screenshots of conversations with Dad about meeting me. They put him in one of the unmarked cars while the warrant team pulled up in a big van. I watched officers go into our house with boxes and bags, moving room to room with some kind of scanning equipment. They found cameras in places I never would have thought to look like inside the ceiling fan in my room and behind the toilet tank in the bathroom. One officer came out carrying a whole box, just of tiny microphones they'd pulled from different rooms. Another had 3 laptops and a bunch of external hard drives from Dad's office. They even found recording devices in the garage and basement where I hardly ever went. The whole search took almost 2 hours and they kept bringing out more equipment I didn't even know we owned. The detective's phone rang and he told me Dad was being brought in for questioning at another station. They'd picked him up at his fake conference, which was really just him sitting in a hotel lobby 20 minutes away. Dad was already telling them this was all artistic expression, and we'd given full family consent for everything. He claimed I was making things up because I was mad about college costs and wanted to hurt his career. The detective rolled his eyes and said Dad could explain that to the prosecutor. My phone started blowing up with notifications as the podcast network posted a statement on their social media. They said they'd temporarily suspended Dad's show pending investigation, and were cooperating fully with authorities. They claimed they had no knowledge of any illegal activity, and were shocked by these allegations. The comment section turned into a war zone within minutes. Some subscribers were attacking me, saying I was ungrateful and ruining a good thing that helped so many parents. Others were horrified that they'd been listening to illegally recorded content of minors and wanted their money back. People started sharing clips from old episodes trying to figure out if they could hear distress in our voices. Someone found my social media accounts even though I'd made them private and posted screenshots of old photos with weird comments about finally seeing the face behind the voice. My best friend texted asking if I was okay because people at the school were already talking about it. The detective helped me lock down all my accounts and said I should stay off social media completely for now. He explained that the buyer they'd detained was already trying to make a deal with prosecutors and would probably testify about what Dad had promised him. The forensics team would go through all the devices they'd seized, which could take weeks, but they already had enough to charge Dad with multiple crimes. My brother asked if we'd have to go to court, and the detective said eventually, but not right away. Clarissa pulled out a stack of forms from her desk drawer and started filling them out while the detective made more phone calls in the hallway. She wrote down everything that happened, checking boxes about immediate danger and asking me to sign at the bottom of each page. The courthouse was only 10 minutes away, and she drove us there herself, my brother staying with another counselor back at the school. The clerk at the family court window took our papers and told us to wait in the small room down the hall. 20 minutes later, a judge called us into her chambers where Clarissa explained the situation while showing the evidence we'd printed out. The judge's face got harder with each photo of the hidden cameras, especially the ones from the bathroom. She signed the emergency order right there, making it illegal for Dad to contact us or come within 500 feet for the next 2 weeks. The bailiff took copies to serve Dad wherever the police found him. Back at the station, a woman from Child Protective Services was already on the phone with Mom's old number from the school records. She'd moved to Seattle 3 years ago, but still had legal custody rights she'd never given up. The CPS worker explained the situation, and Mom started crying on speakerphone, saying she'd catch the first flight out tomorrow morning. My brother would need somewhere safe to stay, and Mom was the only option since our grandparents lived in another state. The worker started the paperwork for temporary emergency placement while Mom booked her ticket online. A legal aid lawyer showed up at the station with a folder full of papers about victim compensation funds. She sat with me in the conference room explaining how the state had money set aside for people in situations like mine. There were forms for emergency housing assistance, counseling costs, and even education expenses if Dad's crimes affected my ability to pay for school. She said we could also file a civil suit against Dad and the podcast network for damages, though that would take months to work through the courts. The network had deep pockets and would probably want to settle quickly to avoid bad publicity. She gave me her card and said to call when I was ready to start the process. The detective came back and explained that even though they had Dad in custody, Building a solid case would take time. They needed to go through all the devices they'd seized, extract the recordings, and match them with the contracts and payments. The forensics team was already working, but it could be weeks before they had everything documented properly. He told me to stay off social media completely since anything I posted could be used by Dad's lawyer to claim I wasn't really traumatized. The press would probably start calling soon, but I shouldn't talk to anyone without checking with the prosecutor first. He said cases like this moved slowly through the system, and I needed to be patient. At the school the next day, the financial aid office had already heard what happened from Clarissa. The counselor there helped me fill out an appeal for more aid based on special circumstances. She showed me a list of emergency grants for students facing family crises and helped me apply for 3 different ones. The applications asked for documentation, so I uploaded the police report and protective order. She also connected me with a donor program specifically for students escaping abusive situations. The woman who ran it called me that afternoon and said they could provide $2,000 immediately for books and supplies. I'd need to write a letter explaining my situation for their board, but she assured me they'd approve additional help for housing and meals. The campus security office at my future college had been notified by Clarissa about my situation. They set up a phone meeting where the security coordinator walked me through their safety protocols. My dorm assignment would have extra security measures, and they'd put a privacy flag on all my records. No one could access my schedule, room number, or personal information without my written permission, not even family members. They'd also notify the RAs about the situation, so they could watch for anyone asking about me. The campus had emergency buttons throughout the buildings, and they showed me how to download the safety app that connected directly to their dispatch. A woman from Victim Services called to schedule my first therapy appointment. I didn't want to go, but Clarissa said it was important to have documentation of the trauma for any future legal proceedings. The therapist's office was in a plain building downtown with no signs outside. She had a calm voice and didn't push when I said I wasn't ready to talk about everything yet. We spent the first session just discussing coping strategies for anxiety and how to recognize triggers. She gave me a journal to track my feelings and said we'd work at whatever pace felt comfortable. My best friend kept texting to check if I was okay since rumors were spreading at the school. I texted back that I couldn't share details yet because of the legal stuff, but I was safe. She said she understood and sent a heart emoji, adding that she was there whenever I needed her. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived at the school from a law firm representing Dad. The papers claimed I was making false accusations to destroy his podcasting career and damage his reputation. His lawyer demanded I retract my statements and delete any social media posts about the situation. They also wanted access to my phone and computer to prove I was lying about the recordings. Clarissa helped me forward everything to the legal aid lawyer who said this was typical intimidation tactics. The protective order hearing was scheduled for next week, and Dad's lawyer would try to argue it should be dropped. Meanwhile, the prosecutor called with news about the buyer they'd arrested at our house. His lawyer was working on a plea deal where he'd plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testifying about his conversations with Dad. The buyer had saved all their emails and messages discussing the meeting and what Dad had promised would happen. The prosecutor said this testimony would be crucial for proving Dad's intent to endanger me. The protective order hearing happened a week later, and I sat in the courtroom gripping the folder of evidence while Dad's lawyer argued I was making everything up for attention. The judge looked through the photos of hidden cameras, the contracts with buyers, the bank statements showing $8,000 monthly from subscriptions, and the messages where Dad promised that buyer I'd be alone for their meeting. She asked Dad directly if he'd installed recording devices in our home, and he tried to explain it was for his parenting podcast. But the judge cut him off and extended the protective order for 6 months, meaning he couldn't contact me, come near me, or post any content featuring me anywhere online. 2 days after the hearing, Bernard called to tell me the network was permanently canceling Dad's show and removing all archived episodes from their platform, though they admitted some content was probably saved on subscribers' devices forever since people download things. I spent the next 3 days changing my phone number, setting up 2-factor authentication on every account I had, and scrubbing my social media presence completely, which was exhausting, but necessary for my safety after everything that happened. The financial aid office called with good news that an emergency grant would cover part of my tuition, and they'd found me a work-study job on campus in the library. Not enough for everything, but at least a start toward independence from Dad's money. Move-in day arrived 2 weeks later, and my brother helped me carry boxes to my dorm room, while Mom was getting him settled into her apartment across town. All of us figuring out this new reality together after years of Dad controlling everything. The prosecutor's office asked me to write a short impact statement about how this affected me, and I sat at my laptop for hours trying to keep it factual and focused even though I wanted to scream about everything Dad stole from us, our privacy, our trust, our sense of safety in our own home. My brother sent me a photo from his new school the next week, standing with some kids at lunch, and looking happier than I'd seen him in months, and we set up a weekly video call every Sunday to stay connected through everything that was happening with the legal stuff. That first night in my dorm after unpacking everything, I turned off my phone and actually slept for 8 hours straight without waking up once to check for hidden cameras or wondering if Dad was recording. And while I knew I wasn't healed and probably wouldn't be for a long time, for tonight at least I was safe in my own space. Well, friends, this really has been a journey, and I appreciate you sticking with me through all my questions and wonderings. Can't wait to do it again. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.